You look at this and you see Christmas Holiday, Deanna Durbin, Gene Kelly. But this is the Arthur Lyons Film Noir Festival. So this is not White Christmas and It's a Wonderful Life. The film was made in 1944 by Robert Ziadmak. And we just saw, some of you just saw The Suspect that Ziadmak directed. Great film. And Ziadmak really was perhaps the most consequential film noir director of the 1940s. And he made The Suspect and Christmas Holiday in inverse order. He made Christmas Holiday first and then The Suspect. And in 1928, he proposed a film, made it on spec, called People on Sunday, which was about a 70-minute film on what Berliners in Berlin did on Sunday. And just to show you if anyone discounts the influence of immigrant directors, working with him on this film was his brother Kurt Ziadmak, the well-known screenwriter who would write The Wolfman. The cameraman was Fred Zinnemann. The assistant director was Edgar G. Ulmer. And also Robert Ziadmak's roommate helped him out, a guy by the name of Billy Wilder. So that was a lot of talent for a 70-minute film. Christmas Holiday was a book by Somerset Maugham. The movie bears very little resemblance to the book, and when I say very little resemblance, Walter Wanger, the producer, wanted to make a movie from this book in 1939 and proposed it, and it went to the Production Code Authority, Joseph I. Breen, who was the prelate fencer at that time, and they looked at that and said, let me see, a film about prostitution, adultery, and a whiff of incest. No. We're never going to make a film out of this book. Several years later, a producer, Felix Jackson, who would become the second or third husband of the star Deanna Durbin, proposed rewriting it. Rewrote it with Herman Mankiewicz, the great screenwriter, the great Mankiewicz who collaborated with Orson Welles on Citizen Kane. And they made the movie. And the movie is the most un-Deanna Durbin-like movie you'll ever seen. She was the songstress that really rescued Universal Studios from financial oblivion. She was the girl next door, cute, perky, great singer, and to have her in this film was just completely casting against type. And ironically, Miss Durbin, this was her favorite film of all things. And it was hugely successful. This came out during World War II, and Deanna Durbin was a large draw, and this film somehow resonated with the American public. It's kind of hard to understand. Cinematically, it's beautifully filmed by Ziadmak and the cameraman Woody Burdell, and you can see their combination not only in this film, but also in The Killers. And you can see the UFA, expressionist and lighting and camera framing. And Ziadmak specialized in films that went into the romantic triangle of people in conflict. In fact, I think one of his best films in that venue is the film Crisscross that we have shown here before. I think the term legend, superstar are really overused, particularly in Hollywood. But when you talk about Gene Kelly, this is somebody that reinvented dance for movies and took it to a whole new level, not just as a performer, but as a creative artist. And here today, I'm just really pleased to have our special guest today who's going to talk about the film, Gene, and Gene's whole career, both as not only just a performer, but as an actor, a choreographer, and one of our greatest creative artists, is Gene's widow, biographer, and film historian. Please welcome our special guest, Ms. Patricia Ward Kelly. As I said during my intro, this was Deanna Durbin's favorite film. What was Gene's reaction to this?
Gene said, I couldn't stand this picture, so.
Why was that?
Well, can we go into how he got into this?
Yeah, well, actually he was under contract to a different studio and he ended up making this picture at Universal. How did that happen?
It's a bit of a circuitous route of what got him into this. Some of you may know that Gene at MGM was not really wanted there. They really didn't know what to do with Gene. They couldn't figure out. They put him in a bunch of B pictures and things. And then finally, they loaned him out to CoverGirl with Rita Hayworth to Columbia. And it was kind of an overnight sensation. And suddenly, MGM decided that Gene Kelly might be worth something. They saw his alter ego number that he choreographed and decided he might have a role to play. But there was another thing that came along, and it was to star opposite Katharine Hepburn in Dragon Seed. And Gene had always wanted to appear with Katharine Hepburn, so he was so excited to do it. And he went in. William Tuttle, the makeup artist at MGM, said, "We're going to have to do something with your face." And so they took Gene and put gum over his eyes to make his eyes more open, and a rubber nose, and shaved his eyebrows, and to make him look like a Chinese man. And he went into the executive suites to watch the Rushes with Benny Thaw, and from head on, and he had also taken Chinese, studied Chinese, so he could pass with the language and the sound of the language, and it was passable. And so they were watching him from head on. It was perfect, it was believable. And then he turned profile, and you saw that Irish aquiline nose, and he looked like an Irish Chinaman. So they decided that the only person who could really play the role was Turhan Bey. And now this is in the Hollywood style, typical style. Turhan Bey was from Austria and of Turkish descent, but he was going to play the Chinese in Dragon Seed. So because they were essentially slaves, they were like ball players and were traded, they decided to trade one Turhan Bey for one Gene Kelly. So Gene was loaned out to Universal for the role, and he said that if he had ever read the script and he had been an independent player, he would never have taken the role. He was a big fan of Somerset Maugham, had read the original novel, and said it was just completely twisted and didn't see how they could possibly make a picture out of it. And there are so many changes in it. But he went over to Universal to do this. Now, as Alan said, Deanna Durbin was this huge star, and she specifically wanted Gene to star opposite her and had requested that. And her soon-to-be husband, Felix Jackson, was producing. And this was to be the vehicle to make Deanna Durbin an adult, essentially. She had kissed Joseph Cotton, I think it was, in the previous picture, but this was going to be her first big dramatic role. And they decided Gene was the perfect partner for that. And a couple stories, if I may, tell a couple things about that took place on the set. Now, Richard Worf was Gene's buddy. They had done Cross of Lorraine the year before. And they were just breaking each other up on the set. They just kept laughing and telling jokes and playing games and everything. And Deanna and Felix wanted silence on the set between all the shots and everything. And so Felix came over and said, "Could you please tone it down a bit, stop laughing?" And so they said that they would. And they went into the dressing room. And Richard, as some of you may know, was a great set designer, had also been an actor with London Fontaine. And so he would go in and paint pictures, and then he and Gene would do that game where you'd put 3 lines on a piece of paper, and then you'd sketch from it. And Gene said Richard Worf would draw these beautiful pictures, and Gene had no drawing ability whatsoever, and would do these funny, bad cartoons. And because there was so much time, it was very, very tedious to light these scenes, and there was so much time in between them. So Gene started touch football matches before lunch and after lunch to keep everybody occupied. And on the opposite team was a young actor by the name of Donald O'Connor, who was under contract at Universal. And one day, Tommy Shaw, the unit manager, came out and said that the word had come down from the powers that be at Universal and said that Donald O'Connor could no longer play touch football because he might get hurt. And Gene said they didn't care what happened to me because I wasn't their property, so they didn't care if I got hurt. So they just played. Gene said Deanna Durbin was very, very nice. He thought she was a terrific singer. Some of you may have seen the short with Judy Garland and Deanna Durbin showing their contrasting styles. Deanna is obviously the classical singer and Judy the swing singer. And when it came time to decide which one of them to keep at MGM, L.B. Mayer wanted to choose Deanna Durbin, and the great arranger Roger Edens said, "No, you keep Judy." And so they sold Deanna to Universal. and this trading back and forth.
This notion of, it's always struck me in doing research and writing how people like L.B. Mayer and Jack Warner and Howard Hughes, I remember Howard Hughes referred to Mitchum and Russell as his property. It is startling. It was a different era.
No, Gene said we were slaves. We had no choice. If he had chosen not to do this picture, he would have stopped out and he would not have been on salary. He would have suspended his pay. So it's funny, this role is so counter to Gene. He said, you're not going to believe this was actually a hit. And he said, the only reason I can think it was a hit was that everybody thought they were going to a Gene Kelly, Deanna Durbin musical.
I think part of it was somewhat clever, and I don't know who was responsible for that, either Mankiewicz or Jackson, to tap into the kind of World War II malaise and the whole story of the soldier and all of that, and the Dear John letter. And I think part of that must have resonated, but the whole, the whiff of incest that I referred to with Gail Sundergaard and Gene's character, that was really over the top for 1944, to put that out
Well,
there.
and as you said, so much of it is over the top. And in the original novel, it is not only the adultery and the prostitution and the incest, but there's also a very strong homosexual part to it that doesn't come into the movie. But it was funny when you look at this was just making me laugh because Gene, after he did For Me and My Gal, he was always doing the kind of first adult pictures with women. He did the first adult picture with Judy Garland and here with Deanna Durbin. And he would go to New York and he would travel with, do you remember the writer Walter Winchell?
Of course.
And the writer Damon Runyon. They would ride around in the car together and chase the police calls so that Walter Winchell could get the top story and everything. And so Damon Runyon had throat cancer and couldn't speak, so he wrote everything on little pieces of paper. And Gene said that he wrote, as they were driving around, he wrote a note about Gene that said, put a gun in his hand. That Damon Runyon thought that Gene should be playing roles just like this, that he shouldn't be doing the song and dance bit. So he had actually sent a note to RKO saying, hire Gene Kelly and put a gun in his hand. So you saw him with a gun in his hand.